Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Faerie Conclave. This is episode 104. I'm your host, Alec, and I'm super excited to be here with somebody who I'm so glad we could make this work, finally, and it's Lee from MTG Specs. Hi, Lee. How are you doing today?
Hey, Alec. I'm doing really well. This is Wild, my favorite podcast, and I am on it, which is amazing. I didn't tell you this when we were organizing it, but when I started my YouTube channel, I chose 3 goals, and one of the goals was to appear on the Faerie Conclave and geek out with you. So this is happening. It's incredible. So thank you so much for having me.
Of course. That's such a nice thing to say. I'm blushing right now. Thank you so much.
No, it's amazing. You've created such a space for like joy and just being a dork, basically. And
yep.
I'm here for it. So thank you so much.
Yes, of course. Yeah, it's my favorite thing in the world. I feel like you just get so much value out of talking to people about their favorite things in general, like their passions. And we get that so much from building Commander decks and playing Commander. So yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And I want to introduce you a little bit more because you are making some of the highest quality YouTube videos that I have seen from somebody who I think has only been making them for about a year, right?
Yeah, the birthday of the channel was Tuesday just gone. So, that's so nice of you to say. I really wanted to bring the good quality audio, the good quality videos, and just like top-notch stuff. And it's so nice to hear that you see that. That's really great. Thank you so much.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, tell me about that. What made you want to start doing YouTube? And yeah, what kind of got you into it last year? Also, happy birthday.
Thank you so much. I think it was a necessity, to be honest. I had to do this. I am a neurodivergent chap, and I was sort of drowning in my passion for Magic a little bit. I wasn't really sure where to put that. I'd created my own Magic the Gathering set called Mirios Fire and Flood, which will never see the light of day. And I've been creating like proxied decks of other IPs, but obviously Wizards is doing that well enough now, so I don't need to continue. And I was like, what do I do with all this passion and love I have for this game, which has basically walked hand in hand with me through the last 25 years, and has been this refuge like high fantasy can be for queer and neurodivergent people and others. And I thought, right, it's time to put myself out there, take up some space, start using my voice, and just that's how the channel began. MTG Specs stands for spectacle, spectacular. It's how I feel about the game, and it was the best choice I made to like download some of the stuff from my brain onto YouTube. But it's been an amazing year. I'm so glad I like took the plunge, as it were.
Yes, yeah, me too. I love that as like an inspiration to start, just because you need to put that passion somewhere, like into something. Kind of outside of just playing, and that's exactly what I felt too. So that's a very similar feeling, and I feel like it's really important for people who need an outlet for things like that, especially when you can't find that a lot of other places in the real world. So yeah, that's really important. I like that a lot.
And there's also a sense with like the high fantasy stuff that's anything is possible, and for people in certain groups, you need to have that sometimes when maybe you think things aren't as possible or a bit hopeless. You've got this. I know it sounds silly. I'm talking about a card game here, but it has been that important to me, and it's represented so much that's good in the last 25 years. So here's MTG Specs. It's just an incredible thing to have done. I'm so happy.
Yeah, I love it. And I honestly, so we'll have links to to MTG Specs, of course, but also we have some specific ones to this commander we're going to be talking about. But yeah, if you haven't heard of or follow Lee on MTG Specs, like you should have 100 times as many subscribers on YouTube as you do right now, like easily. And once you go look at the YouTube page, you'll understand what I mean. But
Now I'm blushing, Alec. Thank you. Those are very kind words.
Yes, no, had to get you back for that. But yeah, and I wanted to shout out specifically, you've started doing a gameplay series, which is, for one thing, like an enormous feat. Like that's extremely difficult. But you've already, like, out of the gate, it looks great. You've got the top-down cameras showing all the boards that look amazing. Like you've got the cards popping up so you can tell what's happening. I can tell that a lot of effort and care and love has gone into, like, specifically making sure that's accessible and easy to follow, and it's just fun to, like, the guests you have, I can tell you're just friends with them. It's like playing Commander, playing Magic with your friends. It's a really good vibe, so I enjoy watching this.
Thank you. That was one of the goals also of the channel. I have the most amazing play group. I adore them all, and I want to get them in front of cameras because they are funny, intelligent people. They're great players. We've got lots of members of the LGBT plus community. We've got some amazing allies, and I thought I want to get these people in front of cameras, and not all of them have yet, but I shall tempt them with shiny foils until they do. And I just love, we put out 3 episodes. It's called MTG Spectacular. Hasn't been viewed a huge amount, but to be honest, I'm just happy to have this document of me and my friends enjoying the best game ever created. So the views are a secondary part to that. But thank you. The quality, I'm a perfectionist. I need the quality to be good, and there's a lot of work gone into them. I've got friends who have helped with that. I've got editing friends. I've got friends who are documentarians. So I'm a very lucky boy. So nice. Yeah, you're seeing a lot of hard work there. Thank you. Again, blushing. I'm blushing so much. Appreciate you.
I love it. Yeah, and I think I love that you shouted out the people who are helping you kind of set all of this up, because it's definitely takes more than one person to put all of this especially YouTube videos and all this stuff together. So yeah, that's really cool. And I think especially for things like this, like gameplay videos, they'll be watchable forever. It's not like it's only relevant now. Once you pop off, which I'm sure you will, the views will happen, and it'll be awesome. And I'm excited for that.
The Faerie Conclave endorsement, amazing. Thank you so much.
100%. Yes. Okay, I think it's time we get into it, because we've been talking about this gameplay videos, and you played this deck on the most recent one, and it was awesome. It was really cool, and I don't want to spoil the video too much, but I know we're going to talk about it as we talk about this deck. But before we get into it, I do want to shout out one of my patrons at the Conclave Mentor patron level, and I just could not resist shouting you out, Lee. Thank you for being a patron at the Conclave Mentor level. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the shout out, but people will think that I've bought my way onto your podcast now. And well worth the cost, of course. Everyone else should be Conclave. What is it? Conclave Mentors?
Yep.
Is that what
exactly?
I am? Yeah. Everyone else should be doing the same thing, of course.
Oh yeah, I'm not adverse to taking bribes every once in a while, so
It's good to know. Good to know.
I love it. Okay, so I'm so stoked for this. I think this is one of the most flavorful in more than one sense of the word, and just like a really, really cool and unique commander. So I'm excited to get into it. But so my first question for you, Lee, is please introduce us to your deck, who the commander is, and what made you want to put it together in the first place.
So the commander of the deck is the universes within Sweeney Todd of Wilds of Eldraine, Brenard Ginger Sculptor. He has the maddest text. So it says each creature you control that's a food or a golem gets +2/+2 and has trample. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a 1/1 food golem artifact creature. Takes deep breath. In addition to its other types, and it has 2 tap, sacrifices artifact. You gain 3 life, and I have another card which I adore, which is my favorite card of all time, which is Birthing Pod, Match Made in Heaven. This is a Birthing Pod ETB toolbox build. helmed by basically a guy who turns bodies into gingerbread man. I mean, it's the darkest card. I'm so attracted to the darkness. In the actual picture, he's smiling, surrounded by food, enjoying his job, which is everything I wish, well, everything I want to be when I'm older. And yeah, the idea that everything that I sacrifice using my birthing pod-esque cards is going to come back as a gingerbread man is the coolest thing. And I'm always attracted to these weird cards. I mean, it was Marvo, the set in Karlov Manor, Stag in Brothers War. It's always the weird card. He's the weirdest one. I've built it so that I have created a curve through it that we've got protection at the start because people want to kill him, and then we've got Phyrexian splicers in the middle to create golems and wincons at the end. But to be honest, I didn't go that deep when I first saw him. I just saw kind old man who's a serial killer and thought, I have to build this. I have to build it, which is what I have done.
It's true. Like, you know, we would expect a lot more, the art to be a lot more sinister and scary when it comes to a card that's like a legendary creature that's sacrificing or wants your creatures to die, like wants them to be sacrificed so that it can turn them into something else. But Brenard just looks so jolly, so happy, and you know the gingerbread people also involved are they're kind of surrounding him, and they don't seem you know, it makes it even scarier in a way.
It really does. And when you think about the creatures you can put in the deck, so one of the creatures I have in it is Tyrannix Rex.
Ooh.
Oh no, I can't remember the set. What is the set? Tyrannix Rex. Anyway, the set.
Phyrexia. All will be one.
Phyrexia,
that's the one.
All will be one. Yeah. So if you happen to bring him back as a gingerbread man, it's a gingerbread man with Toxic 4. And if you have token doublers out, you have all these mini little dinosaurs with Toxic 4. They shouldn't have Toxic 4, but they do. And it's that sort of imagery that made me fall in love with him. Just these ridiculously powerful, evil creatures that become these tiny smiling gingerbread man who will kill you. It's very Ash versus Dead, all the little mini ashes. That
yes,
sort of vibe.
Totally.
I just love it. Absolutely adore him.
Yeah, I mean, me too. This is just every time I see a video or like any kind of information on Brenard, I'm like, I'm watching that. I am watching this. It's so.
And then, I mean, don't get me wrong. I also see that he is an incredibly powerful commander. You have Golem synergy, food synergy, you have artifact synergies, you have enter the battlefield, you have leave the battlefield. He is a powerhouse. And so I think the first time you meet Brenard, you think it's a chef with gingerbread man. He isn't going to be able to do anything, but he is incredibly powerful, but in a kind of janky vibe way. And that's me. That's my channel, and that's me. So
I love it. Yeah, perfect representation. And I love commanders like this where you can take them a whole bunch of different directions. Like if you wanted to full send the golem aspect of it, you can do that, or the food token / artifact synergy. I know, like Lord of the Rings, we got a whole bunch of stuff that cares about food, which is really cool. Yeah, and then you took it kind of a little bit of an all of the above direction, it sounds like, with Birthing Pod, which is really cool too, that you can have that care about sacrificing creatures to bring out other creatures that then, you know, keep the cycle of gingerbread people continuing.
That's one of the things I adore about him. So if you use Birthing Pod to sacrifice the creature, you're not losing it because it's coming back. So you get the other creature that Birthing Pod is finding, and you get a food golem version of the one you sacrifice. So you're not down any cards, which is insane. He didn't build Birthing Pod with that in mind, obviously, because it's a very old card. But taking full advantage of it.
Nice. Yeah. I guess that's kind of the one downside of a Birthing Pod strategy is you kind of have like one creature at a time in a way. But this just, eliminates that downside entirely. That's pretty cool. So do you have a specific Birthing Pod line in mind, or do you just is it just open to whatever is happening at the table?
It is. I think one of the things I love about this is I can win the game very quickly if I want to. I've put Pestamite in there, which comes into play and untaps something, so it can, or tap something. So it untaps the Birthing Pod so that you can then sacrifice the Pestamite to find Beledar Guardian, which blinks something and bring it back. So I can jump the curve a couple of times if I want a quick game, which is what I like. I can get up to Moonshaker Cavalry, win the game with that. Or if I want to see the cards I've put in my deck, which very often people don't get to see the cards they put in their decks, I get to see them all, and I can take a detour wherever I like. So I get to, and obviously that detour usually is Gruff Triplets, because it's my favourite card from one of my favourite cards from last year. And there's other cards as well, which I think if I'm having a longer game, if I'm having a game where I just want to be a bit wacky, then I can look for those cards. And that's why it's the perfect deck for me personally, to see all the stuff that I put in there.
Nice. Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. I do feel like after a game ends and I'm kind of shuffling my deck back together and I look at, the cards in my hand and that I've played are like, this much of it, 15% of the deck. And I'm like, oh, there's so many things I didn't get to see. Yeah, and decks like this are a really cool way you can find whatever you want, whatever you put in there, especially if it's Gruff Triplets.
You don't have that thing where you bought that one card and it cost you quite a lot of money and you put it in your deck and you've played it 10 times and you've never seen it, you've never played it. Yep. This deck means that everything I invest my money and time into is rewarded. That's why I love it.
Yeah. I mean, that feels good. That's kind of like when you're playing it, it makes you smile, and that's my baseline for if I like a deck and want to keep it around. So yeah, nice. Yeah. Okay, so tell me a little bit more about this deck's history, because I know you've been playing it pretty much since Brenard came out as a card, right? That's kind of when you first built it. What kind of things have you learned, and what kind of changes have you made to it since then?
I did the classic commander player thing of buying all of one type of card because I thought it would be good. So I got all the evoke cards as quickly as possible. There's about 19 of them. And when they arrived, I looked at them and thought, oh, this does not a deck make. So I've wasted my money slightly. Some evoke cards have survived. So evoke cards are so good in this. If you think about Muldrifter, which you can cast for its evoke cost, so usually it costs 5 to be a flying 2/2, and it comes into play, it ETBs, you draw 2 cards. If you evoke it whilst Brenard's out for 3 mana, it comes in, you get 2 cards, it dies straight away, but then comes back as its permanent form, which would have cost 5, and you get 2 more cards, and because it's a golem, it's boosted by Brenard, so it's not even a 2/2 flyer, it's a 3/3 flyer, and that's all for 3 mana if Brenard is out. That was where I started, and then I moved from that to start finding the best ETBs I could in banned colours. And there's so many amazing ETB cards that are released all the time. So this deck, when you said, tell me about the deck history, I couldn't tell you all the changes. I changed it today whilst when I sent you the link. I mean, it's not the same as it was. But I think the main changes that have happened to it is in reaction to my play group, because we go through ebbs and flows of being quite competitive. And Janky only gets you so far in a competitive environment. So I've had to lean on some staples, which I don't mind. I think staples are needed to make Jank work. But it has pushed out some of the weirder card choices that I had at the very beginning. I had False Prophet in there at one point. He's a card that when he dies, he exiles all other creatures that are in play. It costs 4, I think it's 2 and 2 white. And I just love the idea of this, like, Prophet gingerbread man who's just wiped the board, but it wipes your board too. And I'm not against that sort of craziness, because that's my vibe. But it doesn't work in a competitive environment, so I've had to move him out and put in some more competitive cards. Doesn't sit really right with me, but I'm moving back again towards the jankier side of things. Yeah, that's it. It's just the ebb and flow of a play group. You have to react to your meta, and I think Brenard is very good for that. It's not as janky as I'd like him to be at the moment. Gotcha.
Yeah, I've been having some similar ebbs and flows. I like that kind of term for it with my play group, where I'll just play a game with a deck that ends up not being able to do too much because it didn't have enough interaction to deal with what my opponents were doing too quickly. And it is interesting to kind of see that and watch that unfold through your play group. But then we also have, I have some people in my play group who they just don't change their decks. They'll maybe switch out like one card every 6 months. And I also admire that quite a bit too. They're just like, you know what? I'm just not dealing with it. I'm not like that at all, but I do respect that quite a bit.
I have other decks which I am not touching and I won't change, which I can't talk about here because we're talking about Brenard.
True.
I can drop them. No, we don't have time. But I have other decks which are very janky and I'm refusing to change. And if I don't win with them, then that's fine because I got to do the fun things that the deck does. But Brenard is special to me, and I want to take the chef to the top.
Yes.
His army of gingerbread man, so he gets my good stuff. I just adore him. And he deserves the good stuff, even
For
if he's
sure.
pure evil.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and one thing I noticed just from the so episode 3 of your gameplay series is where you played this deck. And one thing I noticed about at least that play group in that video is they play a lot of kind of like fog effects. Not to spoil it too much, but there's a lot of those kind of reactive like ink shield type of fog effects, and I really like that because I love playing those cards myself, but then seeing a game where those cards are played several times, I can see for a deck like this where you're wanting to make all these creatures and swing out, you're like, why do you keep fogging me when I'm trying to attack you?
People won't see that I put my hand to my head when you mentioned the fog effects, and thank you for that trauma, the PTSD from that game. But this deck might be a fancy toolbox deck, but it is at its heart an aggro deck as well. So we do have those problems. I have counter spells in there to try and deal with those things, but everyone go and watch the game, obviously. But fog effects, I wake up in a cold sweat thinking about fog effects after that game. Made for a great moment in that game, again not giving too much away, but Brenard and aggro and fog effects do not mix together. It's not a good recipe. Haha, pun.
Yes, exactly.
So but thanks for bringing that up, Alec. I really appreciate the trauma.
Yeah, now we can be sweating a little bit for the rest of this episode. It's true though. I feel like I always want to play more of those, but then seeing the aftermath of what happens when you are actually playing a lot more of those, it's interesting. There's definitely a balance there with the play group. I think it's kind of fun to watch unfold.
Well, these people they're wise to me. They're wise to my I don't want to use the word shenanigans, but here it comes. They're wise to my shenanigans. I'm wise to theirs. This is why I love having this group of people to play with every week, because there's something going on outside. Well, it's the meta obviously, but something going on outside of our commanders. There is a little bit of an arms race on occasion. You've done that to me last time, so I'm going to change my deck in this way. And what you saw in that match was people are just they know what's coming, so they're going to put things in their decks that counter that. I mean, Brenard has become a bit of a monster in our play group, and I'm lucky if I can keep him on the board, let alone attack with him and be fogged. So I will need to do something now to counter the fog effects, and then it will just escalate from there.
Yep. And that's, we kind of love to watch that journey. And I'm obsessed with the idea that Brenard is like the scourge of a play group out there. That's just so good. I love that.
Yeah. This old cook is brilliant.
Amazing. So we've talked about a lot of this kind of next question, but is there anything more you'd like to say about just what do you like most about playing this deck? Like what brings you joy when you play it?
Well, we may have not talked about is that the deck is rammed with every white and green token doubler there is. So we said that there's lots of ETBs. And when something dies whilst Brenard is in the kitchen, they come back as tokens, but they come back as many tokens, which means I get many ETBs. Why the neurodiverse person decided to choose Trigger Central for his main favourite deck, I have no idea. I honestly can't keep up with it, but I still want to do it. That is my favourite thing, though. That suddenly, out of nowhere, it's Instaboard. There are golems everywhere, and they all look different. They're all these crazy gingerbread people, and they're ETBing all over the shop. And a new creature's on its way from the birthing pod line. It's just insane what it can do. It kind of pushes outside the boundary of a 100-card deck. If you're thinking like 1-for-1 card, this card does this. All these cards synergize so well together that it's basically creating memories and stories. I mean, you'll ask me later on what my favourite moment was, and no one else has had that favourite moment. This deck produces moments that nobody else has had, that only I've had. That's why I think it's quite special, and I have so much love for Brenard. Just nuts. Yeah. Completely nuts.
Yeah, that's really cool. And as I was looking through your deck list, I paused on Legion Loyalty, which is similarly turning your one card into mini cards and your tokens into many, many more token creatures. And I was just in love from there. So
do you notice that Academy Rector was in there as well?
No.
Which is a card. So Academy Rector is a card I'm very lucky to own because it's reserve list. But when it dies, you can exile it and then find any enchantment in your deck and put it into play, and it costs 4. So I only put that in there for what's the card we just mentioned?
Legion Loyalty.
I only put it in there for Legion Loyalty because I wanted to give everything Myriad, and I've managed to achieve it, and it's so much fun. In fact, you're then getting loads of bodies, and you can sacrifice those to cards that draw you cards based on the power of things. It's just this living, breathing kind of ecosystem.
Yeah.
That's the magic I want to play. I want to play a deck that just goes outside of its bounds. Thank you for spotting that, because that's a recent addition. It's an edition that is costs 8, I think, or 10. And
yeah. 8. 6 white, which is probably shouldn't be in some of the decks that I put it into because of that, but I don't even care. Like, it just can do. You never know what to expect when Myriad is involved with everything that you have. So
yeah, and then obviously ETBs, and they Myriad.
Yep.
You have Myriad and more ETBs coming into play. This is what I mean by you're just doing the most all the time.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep up with, but it is immense fun.
Yeah, and I also love decks like that, even when I'll have turns where I have like 40 triggered abilities or ETB effects that I have to resolve, and I'm just like, everyone needs to give me a second. I'm just going to go through this, and hopefully it all works, that I do it all correctly. But I just love that kind of thing, even if it is a bit stressful in the moment.
I have such amazing people that I play with. They will point out the triggers that I've missed, which is wonderful.
Same.
We look after each other whilst we're playing, and I will miss them, and they are helpful enough to say that ETB'd and that's ETB'd and that's done that and that's done that. So I'm very lucky to have them.
Yep. Yeah, that's how my group is too. I'm just like, I appreciate you so much because I read that card 3 seconds ago and I already forgot about its ability that just happened. So that's what we're here for, is to help each other out and have the best game experience possible. Sometimes when it's late at night and you're still playing like a late Commander game, it's like, okay, it's a all hands on deck kind of situation here.
I don't touch Brenard if it's one of the last games because there's too much going on. I go for Maelstrom Wanderer and I just stomp the table. Yeah, Brenard is their first game of the night.
Totally. Yep. Yeah, I have like a Maronar Rats deck, which is when it's later, I'm just like, all I do is play Rat and then make more of them. And I'll save my other decks like Bernard for earlier. I love that. Okay, so I'm excited about this part because I think we dipped into it a little bit earlier talking about the gameplay episode. But what would you say are this deck's weaknesses?
Apart from the fact that people will cotton on to Bernard is not just a kindly old man who likes baking, they will start to take him out, but then you should build the deck to mitigate that. And Toolbox can work on its own. So, if he doesn't manage to stick to the battlefield, you can use your Toolbox, you can use your Birthing Pod-esque type cards. I think the biggest weakness, apart from, as we mentioned, and thank you again for bringing up the horrible moment in that game with the fogging effects, it's really about being respectful of other players' time, because if you are searching through your deck for a 5 mana value card because you've podded away a 4 mana value card, you need to know what card you're going for. It's like when people are using fetch lands. It can take so long, but this is even bigger than that. You've got 6 cards to choose from. You should know what you're searching for. So I would say one of the weaknesses is just the effects it can have on other players. And then we've got all those ETBs and we've got all those copies to track, and tracking the copies with standard MTG, like Magic the Gathering copy token, is just too difficult. You need to make your own tokens or have dry wipe. Because I've had tokens getting lost, copy tokens lost under my lands, and not knowing what creature it is or where it's come from. So there's organising your board and there's being respectful of other people's time.
I think that's really good advice for anyone that plays a deck that like cares about tutoring a lot or is just searching your library. As a kind of example I just built a deck that is about the Grim Captain and the Grim Captain's throne.
Me too.
Oh, okay. We'll have to talk about that. I ended up choosing Sidisi, the mono black one, Undead Vizier, as the commander, which is specifically to tutor for the throne of the Grim Captain, since it can't be my commander itself. So that's a situation where, it comes down and I can kind of pass the turn, because I'm just getting this one card every time and putting it into my hand. But then later in the game, if Sidisi dies and then I'm like recasting it, I'm searching for other stuff based on the situation on the board. And that's exactly the kind of thing I've been conscious of the last couple times I've been playing it is I don't want to do that unless I know in my mind what card to search for, because I'll search for it and then I'll play it and then I'll have like effects and all these things happening. And I definitely want to be respectful of the other player's time and not just be like searching through my deck, I don't know exactly what I should get, and just kind of making them wait. So I think, I'm glad you brought that up as a tip for decks like this, because normally fetch lands, you're like, I'm grabbing a forest or a shock land or whatever, so I can just pass to you. But for this deck, it's like, no, I'm grabbing something that comes in, has ETBs, has all these other things trigger off of it. So I love that you mentioned that, because it's important for anyone, maybe if they're interested in building a deck like this, if they, you want to practice it before you hit the table with 3 other people, so you're not, spending forever searching your library for stuff.
And have the deck list open on your phone or somewhere nearby. I'm sure people won't mind. And then you can quickly look at what you've got in the 5 mana valley, for example. Have it there. I don't think anyone would care. And if it helps their evening move along swiftly, then that's another piece of advice that I would give as well. I've sat next to someone having a bad night whilst I'm having the best game of my life with Brenard, and they're having to wait whilst that's just injury on top of injury, really. You've just got to be mindful of the fact that someone wants another game, and if they're not having a great game, it's time to move on.
Totally.
You cannot be searching through your deck hours for that perfect card.
Right.
Fair enough for people.
Totally. Yeah, and we've kind of all been in both of those situations before, right? Where you're the one who you're stuck on short on lands, or your deck just isn't, keeping up, and you're like, okay, I know you're searching for something, like, please just kill me. I need you to end the game. So reasonable expectations, I think, for a deck that wants to do stuff like this.
And linking on to that, you've just mentioned about being able to kill people. It's all well and good being able to do the spectacle that Brenard can produce. Have win cons in your deck. Don't just sit there being like, look at all the wonderful things I can do. Look at all these tokens and ETBs, aren't I clever? Have a way to close the game out, because again, that's not respecting someone's time. Have a way to kill them. Some decks don't have those win cons, and they need to have them in place. Otherwise, what are we doing? Just watching one person solitaire magic? That is not fun.
Yeah, and that just reminded me, I was looking at, so the first pre-con I ever got was Marin from 2015, and I was looking at the original deck list for that, because I was like, wouldn't it be kind of fun and interesting if I built like the Marin pre-con, maybe changed it slightly with some newer cards, but just like to go back to like relive that experience. And I was looking at that deck list, and it's like that. It's like, it's doing all these things, keeping your opponent's stuff off the board, no win cons unless you get kind of lucky with kind of like the token makers, but you won't most of the time. So I was like, you know what? Actually, I think this deck list can kind of stay in the past and keep its nostalgia for me, and I won't need to relive that, because it's exactly like that. And especially for decks that care about having a big board presence and kind of aggro, it's, you want to put your Moonshaker Cavalries or Crater Hoofs in here as well to actually be able to kill the person who wants you to win the game.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I've got the Faceless Menace Kadena precon, which is exactly the same thing. Let's cast 1,000 morphs and draw loads of cards, but there is no way to close out that game unless you upgrade it. And I'm not here for that. I'm here for I love to play Magic. I do like to win, and I need to have something that will get me there. Nobody needs to see you just have the best time ever, because they might not be, and I don't. Yeah, it's not the thing. It's not the thing.
Totally. Yep, I really like that. Okay, I am excited to get into some of the specific card choices that you've got in your deck. Are there any notable cards you'd like to start shouting out that fill kind of like specific roles of this deck?
Yeah, the backbone of the deck is the splicers. They're Phyrexian human artificers that when they come into play, they ETB with a 3/3 Phyrexian golem, but they're also lords for the deck as well. So some are giving flying, some allow you to regenerate creatures, some give indestructibility. Of course, Brenard is creating golems alongside those cards as well, and as it's an aggro strategy, you want to be able to build your team. So you're doing that at every increment of the Birthing Pod chain. There is a Phyrexian Splicer or a Splicer card at every stage, so that I can slowly build that up alongside the ones that Brenard is creating, which is also redundancy for the deck in case Brenard is not allowed to stay on the board. And I think Wing Splicer is probably the best card. Flying, I feel like it's underrated in Commander as a win con. Like all those golems are now flying, you're done. That's it. There's a lot of golems flying at your face. So those are the backbone of the deck. And of course you can build the deck just with those. There's enough splicers out there, but I've gone for like 7 of them so that I can just have something to lean on if the game is going wrong for me. Nice. And then the evoke as well. So Solitude is a evoke creature which has the alternative evoke cost of exile a white card from your hand, which means you can do that quite early. This is a 3/2 creature that when it comes into play has flash lifelink. It enters the battlefield and exiles up to 1 target creature, and the creature's controller gains life equal to its power. But if you have Brenard out and you just exile a white card from your hand, you end up with this net 4/3 creature that exiles 2 things because it sacrifices as it comes through based on that alternative cost. Token doublers, and I did this just the other day, I was able to evoke the Solitude by exiling a white card from my hand. It came in, exiled 1 thing, and then out the other end and became food golems and exiled 2 more things. And I did that just by exiling a white card from my hand. That's insane. That shouldn't be happening, but it does in this deck.
That's really cool. And that's exactly what I'm here for, is just those little interactions that make a card that's already pretty good into just being like absurdly powerful. Because you didn't pay any mana for any of that, right? It's just...
No, just had to have Brenard in play and a few other cards. But that's what this whole deck feels like. Once you've got Birthing Pod out, you are paying a little bit of mana. It's 1 and Phyrexian green to completely alter the game state for a smallest amount of mana and get to keep the creature that's sacrificed and bring another one in. No wonder people are killing Brenard. Honestly, I was having this conversation with my husband and going, I just don't know why people come for me all the time. And he was like, will you read the card list and just think about everything you've done to us as a group with this monster chef? And I'm like, yeah, fair enough.
Fair enough, yeah.
I don't want people to kill him, but I understand why.
It's understandable, I suppose. And I just love that so much. Like all these little things you can do, and then you're like, oh, it's just a gingerbread creator. Like, like what are we doing? And that's magic. That's why I love this game so much.
Same. And I forgot to mention there's loads of Birthing Pod-esque cards. So I'm talking about Birthing Pod all the time, but there's Neoform, Eldritch Evolution, Prime Speaker Vanifar is Birthing Pod creature, Vivian on the Hunt is Birthing Pod Planeswalker. So they're all in there as well. So you can be doing it multiple times. All this wacky stuff. It's crazy. I love it. And everything kind of works together really nicely. And you kind of cheat on a lot of mana costs here too, I'm noticing, which always feels pretty good too. It does. It's busted. The deck is busted.
It does seem pretty busted, yeah. Okay, so what would you say is the MVP or most synergistic card of this deck? I think I've got a few ideas, but what are your thoughts on that?
When I read this question, I thought to myself, how do you pick apart the synergy of a deck that is synergy central? And I thought about, instead of a card, I thought about an element. And my favorite part of this is that copies created by Brenard retain their mana value. So if you should pod away something at its mana value, it comes back as a food golem copy of itself, which means it retains its mana value. So you can pod that away and still be at the same point in the chain. So Gruff Triplets is the best for this. It's 3 green, green, green. It's a 3/3, and it's got trample. And when Gruff Triplets enters the battlefield, if it isn't a token, you create 2 tokens that are copies of it. So those copies retain mana value of the original creature, which means you now have 2 extra 6 mana value things to pod away, which is insane. But the insanity doesn't stop there, because when a Gruff Triplet dies, you put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to its power on each creature you control named Gruff Triplet. So you get a reward for getting rid of one of the copies, making everything else bigger. And then throw in some token doublers, and it's not Gruff Triplets, it's like Gruff Septuplets or Gruff Octuplets or whatever 8 is. That card is one of my most synergistic cards in it, because it's doing everything you want to do, creating copies of itself, podding those away, keeping the chain going, making everything bigger. People fear the Gruff Triplets.
Yeah, Gruff Triplets, as soon as it came out, I was like, I wonder what kind of commander deck can play this and take the most advantage of this ability, because it's really unique. Like, there aren't any other cards that do anything like this in this way and have such a snowball effect. But honestly, it might just be this deck. Like, if you've got even one other token doubler out, and I also didn't realize that the gingerbread people like keep their mana values. So that just makes it, that's so good. I imagine that's, just another reason to get rid of Brenard, because that is adding so much. But even still, if Brenard has been taken care of, if you've got token doublers out or birthing pod out and you play Gruff Triplets, like, that's still gonna probably end the game pretty shortly after that. So that's
absolutely.
Like
that. And that's why there's so many like Bant staples in this deck as well, because I do want to keep Brenard out, and I am using the really awesome counter spells that are not the jank way, but they protect the jank way. So I'm happy to have them on board. And the advice is, on the early part of your mana curve for Birthing Pod, have Selfless Spirit in there, have Benevolent Bodyguard, things that can protect him, get them out first. And when he comes out, if you sacrifice your Selfless Spirit to protect Bernard, who everyone's trying to get rid of, it will come back as a food golem. And then you've got protection again. This deck is amazing. I love this deck so much.
It really is. And this is one of those things, this is why I love doing this so much, because looking through the deck list, I just wouldn't have been able to figure out all of these little synergies and the way it all works together. So it's really cool to get all of this insight into all of these little pieces and, why they're in there and what they're doing. Now that we've talked about cards that are synergistic and make sense to have in the deck, tell me more about pet cards that you have in this deck that maybe aren't the best, but you just can't resist playing them here.
I mean, that's the jank way, isn't it? Putting cards that don't belong in your deck. The first one that springs to mind is Wedding Ring, which is a white artifact card that I put in every deck that has white in. Wedding Ring, when it comes into play, you create a copy of Wedding Ring for somebody else, so you're basically married. And every time they draw cards, you draw cards. And every time they gain life, you gain life, vice versa. But the reason that I play it is, of course, that's a lot of value. It's the roleplay opportunity. You can be sitting across from the most serious, the most bro person, but when you propose to them, you just get all girly and giggly and like, oh, you chose me out of all the people in this pod. And then you have this story together, like you and them versus the pod. It's amazing. Yeah. And then inevitably comes the divorce. And then that's sad, and then someone copies the wedding ring, and then you're in a throuple. I just think it's. I like roleplay opportunities. In the game, the MTG Spectacular 3 game that you've mentioned, we had a crown for the monarch. I just like those extra moments where you get to play a character. So marrying someone else in the pod is just really fun. I love that Magic can afford those opportunities as well. So wedding rings. Do you have wedding ring in any of your decks?
I actually don't, and I don't know why, because that's exactly the kind of thing I would want to be doing. And I definitely have a lot of white, I've been building mono white decks lately, which is kind of interesting, but I should be playing Wedding Ring because just like you mentioned about the story of the game, I feel like a game would be so much more memorable if we were a couple weeks later looking back, remember when Alec and Lee got married in this game, and then there was a betrayal, and then you're writing a soap opera here, which I think is really cool.
Exactly. Exactly. And you can also propose to someone. You can say, I've got wedding ring in my in my deck, and if it comes out, you're the one that I'm going to marry if, and then there's a bit of political stuff going on as well. It's just brilliant. I love that card so much. And the other card is a Mirage Mirror. So Mirage Mirror is an artifact for 3 that for I believe the activated cost is 2, and it can become a land, an enchantment, a creature, various different permanent types that are in play. And I always cut it. I want to put it in all my decks, but because it's sort of left of the synergy of your deck, because how are we going to use this? It's very reactive. I always take it out. And I thought, for this deck, no, I'm going to cut Soul Ring instead. I thought, I'm told to put Soul Ring in everything. Well, no more. We will put Mirage Mirror in instead. And it's been amazing. It's been such a good choice. It can copy, if you pay 2, you can copy one of your lands if you need to fix your mana, which I hadn't realised. So you could copy it to make an island, so if you need blue mana. And you can copy the token doublers, so when something comes in, it's doubled and doubled again. I've copied Legion Loyalty, so that the Myriad stacks. So you get two instances of Myriad.
Yes.
And then you can copy people's creatures that are attacking you to block with it, and they lose their creature. It's a Rattlesnake card. It's so good. So I refuse to get rid of this card anymore. It's been cut so many times. Mirage Mirror stays, and we'll be going in more decks.
You're convincing me to reconsider some cards here. Like I'm the same way. I have so many copies of Mirage Mirror because I get it to put into a deck and then end up cutting it, because when you're goldfishing the deck or just kind of brewing it, it is hard to tell what it can do, because you don't like it literally doesn't do anything unless you have the context of the whole game in front of you. But then there are a lot of situations, I'm sure, where looking at the board, you're like, if my Soul Ring were a Mirage Mirror, I could copy that thing over there or this thing over here and then do this. And then, but those are just things you can't see when you're looking at the deck list. So I'm glad you stuck to it and you kept it in this deck.
Thank you. And I also think with Mirage Mirror, it's kind of a representation of something in Commander that a lot of players don't do, which is put reactive pieces in their decks, because when they're gold fishing it, they can't see what that's going to provide them outside of the synergy they already have. They don't put them in. And that happens with removal as well. People are not putting removal in their decks because they're not anticipating what they could face. And I like to try to do that as much as possible. But it's difficult when you put the deck together, because you think that isn't going to be a part of what I'm trying to do. That's a part of stopping somebody else. Or, it's interesting. But Mirage Mirror stays. Oh, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it's always been one of my favorites, and I feel like it's hard to resist putting it in the list because it is colorless, so you can put it in any deck. But it always ends up like when I'm down to 105 cards, I'm like, okay, I'll cut Mirage Mirror. But okay, you've inspired me to reconsider.
Justice for Mirage Mirror.
Exactly. Yeah, we can definitely have that be our goal for this episode.
Excellent. Love that.
Okay, so I'm super excited for this one. What has been your favorite in-game moment that you've had while you were playing this deck?
So I think my favorite in-game moment is being able to attack people with 7/7 flying dinosaurs, because if you've got displaced dinosaurs out, it sees any historic permanents coming into play, and all the golems in the deck that are being created by Brenard artifacts, they're historic permanents. They come into play not just with their ETBs and not just with their original characteristics, but also as 7/7 flying dinosaurs. And that is a story that I don't think anybody else has been able to tell in Magic. I told that story. That's the Magic that I love to play, creating a story that nobody else has been able to do. And that one has stuck out to me because that's insane. 7/7 flying dinosaurs that are also something else as well. On top of that, another creature type. It's insane. I love it. They're gingerbread flying dinosaurs. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It's just incredible.
It is. Yeah, I agree. And I think that something I find really interesting in Magic is taking like something and turning it into some other type of card or permanent that it should not be, and then like getting some kind of reward off of that. And so I love that you've got these gingerbread creatures that are copies of something else, but they're also artifacts. So because they're artifacts, displaced dinosaurs turns them into 7/7 dinosaurs. So now you've got like, you could have any kind of random thing on the battlefield, and now it's suddenly a gingerbread dinosaur artifact that a like horrifying Phyrexian splicer has given wings. Like,
Yeah, and the bit I forgot to say, it's the wing splicer that's giving the flying as well.
Oh, right, yeah.
Flying. So that's the other part of that as well, that's making these dinosaur gingerbread men fly. Dinosaur gingerbread men. Who gets to do that? That's just
So
magic
cool.
is so incredible. You get the right things on the board and you create the most incredible creatures and the most incredible moments. That's why this game is the best game ever.
Yep.
Ever.
I love that. That's such a good story. And I think you're right. Sometimes something will happen in a game and it's just like, I bet you nobody else in the entire world has had a story like this in a game when it's as complex as Commander, where you have 4 players. And I think that's something that's really special and really cool.
It is. Every game is different and there's no other game like it. So
yeah.
Thank you.
I love it. So, okay. I'm sad that we've already reached my final question for you. And we have talked a little bit about this throughout, which I love to talk about. But what advice would you give to players who, potentially like me, who are interested in this deck and are looking to build something like it?
I have definitely touched on this already, but it's about those win cons. A win con that I've put in recently is Keeper of Keys.
Oh, yes.
So when it comes into play, you get the Monarch, and if you manage to get around to your upkeep, then your creatures are unblockable, and that's a 5 mana value creature. So have win cons in this deck. It is fun to pull off the spectacle. It's also fun to win, and it's also fun to manage other people's time respectfully. So I would say look for another win con. Cyberman Squadron from the Grixis Doctor Who Precon gives all your artifact creatures Myriad. It was in there before, but I swapped it out for something else. But you're creating artifact creatures with the food golems. So get your win cons in there. That's really important. And the other thing that I mentioned as well was Brenard will not be popular. He may be popular the first time, but not the second. Protective creatures are a must, and there are lots of creatures that you can lean in. This is a kindly old man, but let's not forget, he is taking dead bodies and turning them into gingerbread. People aren't going to stand for that for too long. I'm surprised there weren't pitchfork villages and flaming torches in WoW.
Right.
Probably was. People would have found him out. They would have looked underneath. There would be some kind of like hole underneath his kitchen where there's just piles of dead bodies he's turning into gingerbread men. So put protected creatures in there because people will come for you.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that, so we know of like Craterhoof Behemoth, Moonshaker Cavalry, Legion Loyalty, like those are all win conditions for sure. But I love that you mentioned Keeper of Keys, because that's another one kind of similar to Mirage Mirror, where when you're building the deck or when you're playing it just by yourself, you make 30 creatures and they're all 3/3s or something. And it's like, okay, I did the thing, but you kind of don't really see until you're playing the game that you can have 30 creatures out, but your opponent might also have 30 creatures out, and your other one might have a bunch of things that block it really well. And so even if you have a ton of creatures, it might still not be enough. And having a Keeper of Keys, just something, it's like very clean. It's like, you're not going to be able to block. Nobody can block. So then in that case, it is like, okay, I just need this amount of creatures, this amount of damage on board. And that's a great win condition. That's another one that's like, you might not be able to see it until you're in the game. But yeah, I really like that addition as well. Also, I'm just kind of biased. I really like that card a lot in general.
Oh, that's great. I love that. And another card that just sprung to mind, because that's what this deck does all the time, is Archetype of Imagination, which gives everything flying and gets rid of everyone else's flyers. That can slot into her easily. Oh, I'm going to have to put that in here now. What am I going to take out? Not Mirage Mirror. Not Mirage Mirror.
Yep.
No.
That's probably pretty hard for this deck too, because it's so open-ended, and for decks that I have that are like this, it's new cards come out that it's hard to find a place to. I'm always finding cards I want to put in, but it's so hard to find something to take out. But I do love experimenting with that kind of thing. And this seems like kind of the perfect deck for that, because you can always find that card you just put in and play it and see how it works. And you can actually like test it without having to play, like you said, 10 games before you even see that new card you put in. So, yeah.
Totally. Absolutely. I think it's going to grow with me over time. There's always ETBs.
Yeah.
Which is a double-edged sword, isn't it, really? Because there'll be like loads of the new set and I'll be like, what do I take out? What do I do? But at the moment, it's pretty solid. It's where it needs to be, and it'll change when it needs to change.
Nice. I love it. Well, Lee, thank you so much for sitting down and telling me all about your Brenard Ginger Sculptor Commander deck. Do you have any final words that you'd like to say about it, or just in general?
Do not suffer Brenard's Ginger Sculptor to live. I say this as someone who pilots him and loves him. Don't take him for granted. But there are, I would say, you can check out my deck list and my deck tech for this, but there are loads of ways to build him. And I think the creative expression through Brenard is going to be unmatched. I would give it a go. He's an absolutely awesome commander. Have fun with him.
Yes. Yeah, totally agreed. And if you're interested in this deck list, like Lee mentioned, there's a whole deck tech video on his channel about it. You can go watch, and then after you've watched that, you can go watch episode 3 of the gameplay series and see this deck in action. Plus a lot of other cool decks in that episode as well. And just one last time, where can everyone find you online, and how can they see your incredible content?
Oh, thank you. Blushing again. So the YouTube channel is MTG Specs, and you can also check out my Instagram where I post pictures of my dog and me in nice outfits, and also a little bit of magic content at MTG Specs EDH. I'm not very good at social media, and I've been told by my younger friends I need to get better at it. I do have a Twitter or an X as well, but I don't know where that is. You have to just stumble across it. I'll put it somewhere. Fair. Maybe Alec will put it in the link.
Yep, can do.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Nice. Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I loved this deck, and it's so fun to find out what's hiding underneath a deck list, whether it's something cool or something like a pile of dead bodies that you didn't expect at first. And
totally.
And one last shout out, all of my patrons at the All That Glitters level, which is Jeff right now. Thank you, Jeff, so much for being a patron at that level. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone else, for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait to catch you on the next one.